Hi, and welcome to the PSD asset import script for Cavalry. The first thing we want to do is to launch our script, PSD asset import, and we'll just go ahead and dock it right here next to the align palette. And nothing's selectable at the moment. It says there's no position data in the clipboard. So let's go ahead and do that. First, we want to highlight best practices, set a project setting so that we can put our assets in the assets folder, and that's going to allow PSD asset import to automatically import assets for us. It's not required, but it does make your life just a little bit easier. All right, so let's go over to our project folder, and in the assets folder, we have a simple PSD called family PSD. And PSD asset import works very similarly to Photoshop's standard automate generator plugins image assets functionality, in that you tag layers and layer groups that you want to export with a .png extension. PSD asset export will ignore anything without the PNG extension, but you can label both single layers or entire layer groups, and the workflow will collapse layer groups into a single transparent PNG. The benefit that this script has over Photoshop's workflow is that it will save entire images even if they are coming out of the pasteboard, as you can see this gas can is. Photoshop's standard image asset export will crop it right to the canvas. Additionally, any layers that have transparency will export at the current transparency with Photoshop's image asset export. But the PSD asset import workflow exports every layer at 100% opacity if you so choose. So we've already installed the companion script to Photoshop, which is export assets to Cavalry. So let's go ahead and just invoke that. So as you can see, the default option is to export everything with full opacity, but if you don't need that, you can always uncheck that. We can choose to target specific selections, but in this case, let's just go ahead and click Assets. And it's telling us that the export is complete. We have 14 PNG assets that were exported, but we also copied over position data for 14 layers as well as 3 guides. Now run PSD asset import in Cavalry on imported assets. So let's hop on over to Cavalry and see what that looks like. Once we click in our PSD asset import palette, we can see that it has pulled information for the clipboard, and now it's telling us we're going to start acting on data from family.psd. Now you don't have to worry about saving this clipboard data from this point forward. The panel will store that data in a local variable. So even if we go and copy something else to the clipboard, like these 2 shapes, we can delete those. We can see that the panel still remembers our last imported data. All right, the next step is as easy as clicking the import button, and it's going to detect our last import. In this case, it's all the files from the whole Photoshop file. We'll just say yes. And because those assets were in this particular project, it's already imported those into a layer set that's named the same name as our Photoshop file and brought those right into our composition. And really, it's as easy as that. We're done. But as you can see, all of the assets were exported in their entirety, and these assets that were transparent in Photoshop have come in with their transparency so that you can continue to play around with that right in Cavalry. But the core flexibility of PSD asset import is the fact that it has stored all of that position data within this panel. So even if all of these things moved around to different spots, we can still select any of our layers and just click the reposition data, and it will position them according to the last data that it found in the Photoshop file. And just to illustrate that, we'll come back here to Photoshop, and let's just go ahead and grab this price tag and maybe the lamp. We'll move those over. I'll invoke our export to Cavalry script again. And in this case, I'm just going to export the data. I've moved those elements around. So we'll click data, and it's telling us that the position info was copied for those layers. We'll come back to Cavalry. It has already updated, and all we need to do is select these 2 things, click position, and now it's matching the position in Photoshop. So you can round trip that as many times as you want, and Cavalry will save the last position, blending mode, and opacity data from your last Photoshop export that was saved to the clipboard. And just to show you how flexible this is, let's come back here to Photoshop, and let's just go ahead and add one more element here on the fly. We'll go ahead and create a little group here, grab a brush, and we'll just put a simple little element right here. We'll call this flower.png, and I'll go ahead and just select that layer set, invoke our export to Cavalry. In this case, we'll just say selection only, click assets. And if we go back to our Finder or Explorer window, under family exports, we can see that that flower was immediately saved out as its own transparent PNG. In addition, it has recopied that information from Photoshop into Cavalry, we can click the import again. And now it's detected that only flower was the last thing that was exported. We'll go ahead and say yes. It has put that back into the family group and put our flower right there on our composition. And we have a couple other options here. We can choose to reorder things. And this is particularly helpful in case maybe you didn't use Cavalry's assets folder, and these are just located really anywhere on your hard drive. So we can just assume, for example, that this list of assets is not in the assets folder. We'll just drag them right into the composition. They've come in a random order, and I'm just gonna go ahead and select all these. But because these assets are from this family.pst, not only can we reposition them, but we'll just click reorder here, and instantly we're back to the same exact positions from our family.pst. Lastly, the panel has detected both the comp size and the guides from the family.pst Photoshop. So assuming this started out as some other portion of a composition, we could just go ahead and click comp size and it will match whatever was in Photoshop. And we can also click guides and bring in all the same guides that came in with our Photoshop file. And even though our import button is going to remember the last asset that we brought over, we can always import everything described in the data set by alt-clicking the import assets files, and it will ask us if we want to import all available assets. We'll click yes, and we're back to where we started. Lastly, you can control or command click the status text to clear the data that's stored in that session variable. It's not required, but if you like to keep a clean palette, that option is there for you. So overall, PSD asset import is incredibly flexible, dynamic. It lets you work in a really organic way with your Photoshop artwork files, and I hope it's helpful to your workflow.